My name is Alina Sergachov. Today is August 8, 2018, and I'm interviewing Jillian Keiley at Memorial University in Gander, Newfoundland.
St. John's.
St. John's. Sorry, we talked about Gander before that.
It's okay.
Thank you so much for coming here today.
My pleasure.
First of all, can you please explain to me what exactly do you do as a theater director?
As a theater director or as an artistic director?
Both.
Okay, they're two very different jobs. As a theater director, I'm responsible for the concept, the idea about how a script is transformed on stage. Sometimes I work with playwrights directly to figure out how their pieces might be made something that you'd see on the stage. And sometimes the playwrights are dead. So I work with the playwrights often. I work with designers and actors. So basically, or most often, I'll come up with an idea, a concept, about how I want to see something realized on the stage, and then I'll choose people who will make that happen. That's half the time I work like that. Other half of the time I work like, I go into a process, I know something nebulous about it, and then I will work with the playwright, the designer, sometimes the actors, sometimes early, but rarely early with the actors. But I usually will work with the designer, and then we'll come up with a concept for the show together. So I've worked both ways. They're both really cool ways to work. And then I kind of steer the course of the show. But I don't. I was never an actor, so I'm not really the kind of director who works a lot on, every single. I expect the actors to work on every single line, and I follow every single line, but I don't know how it should be said, or I don't even know what color things should be most of the time, or I just have a kind of sense of it. But most of it gets. I think it's called directing by conversation.
And what are your key responsibilities during different stages of the production? For example, during tech week or rehearsal period or the actual performances stage?
It's very many different stages. Maybe I can send you some documents to show you how I work, but I work very methodically. For example, right now I'm working with a designer from England to do a show for Stratford for next year, and she's from Canada, but she lives in England. She's working with the Royal Shakespeare Company. So she and I will get together a dozen times over Skype, and then I'm going to visit her next week, and we're going to spend 3 or 4 days together, and we just kind of bash out all these ideas about what we think based on the concept. And so first that happens. I get the script from the playwright. If I can get the script in a Word document, that's what I use. I turn that into a Google document so that everybody's on the same page. I sign up all the designers to the Google Doc. Then I start to lay the sketches into the Google Doc so that the lighting designer is already part of the process. Sometimes the lighting designer doesn't come in until quite late, but I need the lighting designer in always very early. The composer is always in very early. The sound designer is always in very early. So this Google Doc actually becomes this template for the entire. It's not the script for the show. It's actually the show. It's a paper version of the show. So that makes it quite methodical for me because I actually, make images and make links to sound files and all of this stuff is all within this single document that everybody can access at all times. So a lot of my job in the prep is actually just making this document. And that document gives everybody a pretty consistent view of how things are developing. Like if somebody wanted to shadow a show and see how I was working, because usually a shadow or somebody who's learning will come in during rehearsals, but if somebody was really interested in what I was doing, they'd sign on to that Google document. And then they could see the Google document develop every day. Something would change, like different stage directions would happen. And then, so all that's quite methodical. I go into casting for example, for Stratford, I went into casting in August because the rehearsals for that show start in February. So I was in casting for that show in August. So I'll do the concept and design, then I'll do the casting, then I'll do budgeting with the production team. So I'll work, so the production team, now mostly that falls to the designers, but I will be part of it because they'll say, do we, you know, we have this much money for costumes and this much money for props and set, and I'll say, I need hardly any money for costumes, everybody just needs to wear clothes that, you know, maybe it's all blacks or something, and then on props I need way more money on props. So I don't get into the nitty gritty of I need $4,000 here, but I get into this is a prop heavy show instead of a costume heavy show. So I'll be involved in that conversation. I always select my own teams, my designer teams, so that actually comes again back next to the concept. So it's the concept and the design team, really important. Stage management, really important. Who the stage managers are is very important. Some of the other concepts in the outside work, like whether the show is going to have surtitles, whether the show is going to have a relaxed performance for accessibility, whether the show, like all of those things become very, very important. If the show is going to have auxiliary activities, education activities, all of that starts quite early. Then we get into the casting. I get an assistant director, usually. I use my assistant directors a lot. Then the shadows and people who just want to come in and train, they train under the assistant director. And then, for some shows, and this is specific to a kind of style of work that I did in the past and I'm actually starting to do again because I'm going to train other people how to do it. I don't actually have time to make the grids as detailed as I used to make them, but I'm going to train some younger, my old assistant directors, how to do it, and then they're going to start making my grids for me, I think. That's my hope, so I'll find a couple of them to do that. And kind of underpainters, I'll call them. And then they'll do that, and then I will go into rehearsals several months later. So when I go into rehearsals, if it's a grid show, all the choreography happens very, very slowly. And that's kind of, a grid show means it's pre-blocked, so it's, and again, that's very unusual in Canada, but the show is, it calls for the show to be blocked in advance. It calls for the show to be laid out ahead of time, so they'll get a bunch of pieces of paper that they won't understand how to read maybe at first, and then they'll understand it's quite simple. So we'll go into the grid blocking, and then we'll go into the text work on top of that, so the scenes that happen on top of that, and then we rehearse that. We figure out, I do something every second day in rehearsal that calls the whole cast together, because as many people know, you don't usually call the entire cast for every rehearsal. You call just 2 or 3, whoever's in the scene. And then there's a kind of schedule that they follow, that the stage manager does, and they maximize the amount of time you have. And then the next thing we do, or one of the things we do is, I call them symposium, but every second day in rehearsal we bring the entire cast together to talk about the themes and topics in the play. So we have debates, we have round tables, long tables about topics in the show, we have question jars where everybody answers personal questions that are relevant to the show. And so these are ways that we try to tap into people's understanding of the work, and to make it a kind of more fulsome experience for the audience, because the actors have actually talked about the topics in the work, and it's actually their role as storytellers is very important. I don't think that they're just puppets, or I don't think that they're just actors. Actually, I think they're actors who are acting a story. They are the storyteller. It goes right back to that. So philosophically, it's very important to me that the actors are very well steeped in the material, that they know more than just the text about the show, that they actually get special classes and they talk to experts, and we bring in special guests all the time, and it's really a very deeply educational process for them, that it's a real way for them to explore, and so that the things that they're doing on stage are truthful. And then we, you know, block the show. Again, in this method, you block the show first, and then the
Sorry about that.
something wrong. And then we go into tech. So when you're in tech, tech is very intense because you have very little time. You'll never have enough time in tech. You have very, very little time to test out the theories. Here's something that I skipped. Way back between concept and sometimes casting, but sometimes concept and rehearsal, certainly. On that timeline, you do a workshop of the concept. So very often I'll do a workshop beforehand just to test the theory without putting so much money and an audience in front of it. Then you go into tech week and worry about lighting, sound, putting it all together, how everything is going to look, how the spacing is going to work in the room. The things that I haven't talked about, and of course then that leads you to opening night, but you know, I haven't talked about marketing and how the director is very involved in guiding the marketing. We don't come up with the marketing most often. We're not, you know, there's people in marketing who understand how to do that. None of this stuff where, like, there are people who are very, very good, really good directors, I guess, who are really good actors, and they're really good marketing people, and they're really good fundraisers, and they're really good producers. All those things. There's people like that, I guess. I don't really know who they are. But that's not our job, and we're not particularly expert at it. Just because we're the director doesn't mean that we're actually better than other people whose job it is to be a marketer. But we always participate in it because the marketers come to us and they say, what's the concept of the show? What are the colors of the show? Do you want the audience to leave with? What feeling do you want the audience to leave with? Do you want them to know that they're coming to see a tragedy? Do you want them to know they're coming to see a comedy? Do you want them to know that that it's going to be life-affirming? Do we need to scare away people who are going to be offended by this? Sometimes that's part of the conversation. So the marketing aspect is really important. The communications aspect, you do a lot of interviews on television, you do a lot of interviews on the media, and newspapers, of course, and of course the internet. So it's a lot of wheels and a lot of cogs all going, and you are greasing all of them. Your job is to keep them all focused on a single vision. And your job as the director and your kind of the thing that you offer, everybody else offers their expertise and their skill and their talent, and you offer the end goal. So you pitch that end goal and say, this is what we want to see at the end, and everybody else starts working towards it, and you just kind of go, yeah, it's like you're curling, right? You know, like the thing, you're sweeping. Everybody else is like throwing the rocks and being the rocks, and you're the sweeper. You're like, come this way, come this way. And you're trying to get it all to feed into a single vision of what it is. So a director who doesn't know, it's not that it needs to be exact, but you have to have a feeling, right, about what it is. And a director who doesn't know, sometimes they come up with brilliant projects because they're operating collectives or whatever, but a director who doesn't know what they want at all, sometimes they come up with great work. I've seen some directors who work that way, and they come up with great work, but the actors, it can be very frustrating for everybody else because nobody knows if they're on the right track. So, you know, I always think it's a good skill to have to be able to say, okay, this is what we're going for, let's see what it looks like. And then you go, oh yeah, that's cool. And then everybody can change it. The whole thing will change. That's fine. Everything will change. But at least you've said, this is the feeling I'm looking for. This is the end goal. This is what I want the audience to walk away with. It doesn't need to be exact, but it needs to be like, oh, we know how to get there.
And how involved are you during the actual performances period? After you're done with all the rehearsal and the tech week?
I go to opening night and have a few glasses of wine, and I'm out.
Okay.
I don't do anything else. Unless something's damaged, which happens. Yeah, but I don't, no. The stage manager is really important. If the stage manager contacts me sometimes and says, well, this actor is doing this and it's changing the meaning of the scene, and I'll enter a conversation with the stage manager. But I like to make sure that the stage manager has the trust of the actors, so that if the stage manager then goes to them and says, you're doing this with the scene, stop doing it. I can help guide the stage manager on what the intent of the scene is so that she can articulate that to the actor, but I have to respect, because it's a living organism, right? It's not a film, it's a living organism. I go to see shows 3 months, like I have shows that run and run, you know, sometimes they'll open and close the same night, but I have a show that, you know, it opens, and I come to see it 3 months later, and it's a totally different show. Sometimes it's better. Sometimes it's not better. Sometimes it's actually a better show.
And what do you think is the biggest misconception about what you do?
I think people underestimate how much work it is. I think people think all it is I think, like I talked about it being systemic, or like I talked about it being methodical, and it is. I can, you know, I could write down on a piece of paper, first do this, then do this, and do this, and say, here, direct show. But I think the assumption is that sometimes, just like people think anybody can act, you know, because I can speak, I can act, you know. I can't act. I can't act to save my life. I can't do it. I actually don't have that capacity. And I think people probably have the same idea about directing. Oh yeah, I can direct a show. I've been in lots of shows, I can direct a show. It's like, okay, well probably you can. But I don't know that people really know how consuming it is, and how, you know, it's almost like you can teach somebody how to direct. I believe that's true. You can teach somebody how to direct, but you can't, but there's some people who'll never be a good director. It doesn't matter how many classes they take, it doesn't matter how many rules they follow, they just won't be, because they don't have the personality for it. That's terrible to say, but I've kind of seen it, that people, like, the director's doing everything right. They're doing everything right. And they're just not inspiring people, or they're just not, they're not inspiring people, or they're not leading in a way that people can understand. And you need to respond. It's a funny thing, like, I used to be kind of bad, you know. I used to be maybe terrible. I was probably terrible. I might be terrible now. But years ago, I know I made a lot of bad shows. I promise you, they were bad. And you get better at it. But I always had a temperament for it. Like a temperament. I think that that's part of it. Is that you need to be able to have an actor do something totally wrong and go, yeah, all right, man, let's keep working on that. And that the actor doesn't get offended, and that you haven't said no, because there's a germ of something good in what they're doing. But if you follow the rule and go, oh yeah, please don't do that, you know, you said please, you asked, you helped guide them, you didn't yell at them, but the actor suddenly, maybe they're like, oh, I'm not offended, but that germ of the idea, you killed it. So if you have the personality to be able to kind of grab the grain and throw out the shaft, is that something? Wheat. Anyway, if you have the ability to throw out the other stuff without losing the little gem that they've offered you, you're good. But that's very delicate. That's not something you can teach. It's not something you can teach at all.
What do you wish someone had told you when you were just starting out?
Everything I just said to you. Everything I just said to you. Yeah. I think something that people did say to me that I didn't listen to was that you're not supposed to have all the answers. That your job is to guide other people so that they have the answers. And the less answers you have, the better, because then they get to explore it and find the truth of it. Because I used to go in, I used to know what every line was supposed to mean, whatever, you know, because I was very hard worker on that. And then that ends up being wasteful, because you might as well go up and do the show yourself. What are you working with other people for if you know exactly what show needs to look like and exactly what the show needs to say line for line? And if you're telling the designer more than the concept, you know. When I say I have the end goal of what the show should look like, I don't really. I have the end goal of what the show should feel like. I don't have the show what it should look like. Like, I'll come up with a concept or whatever, but what it actually looks like, always different from what I imagined. Always way better. Because somebody else, you just give somebody else the seed of the idea. That's it.
All right, we have 3 minutes left. Is there anything else you would like to talk about? Something I should have asked you about?
Being an artistic director is a very different job than being a director.
What's the main difference in a minute?
The main difference is that everybody says, when you're a director, you kind of think, everybody says, oh, you know, look what Jill can do. And when you're the artistic director, everybody says, look what Jill can do for you.
Nice.
That's it.
All right. Thank you so much for coming here today. I guess this
you're
is the end of the interview.